In Chapter 1, Saeris Fane is caught stealing iron in Zilvaren's elite hub by a Guardian. When she claims to be from the quarantined Third Ward, the Guardian panics, fearing she carries disease. He drops his golden gauntlet in disgust, and Saeris seizes the opportunity, stealing it and sprinting for the wall. She escapes as the crowd disperses, unwilling to interfere with someone from the Third. Despite the gauntlet hindering her climb, Saeris refuses to let it go, knowing its value could buy her and her brother Hayden a future. She narrowly scales the hub wall, enduring pain and risk, and makes it to the top, where the gauntlet briefly hums with strange energy. Ignoring the Guardian's final threats, Saeris escapes with the armor, determined to melt it down before it can be traced. The chapter establishes her desperation, cunning, and the first hint that the gauntlet may be more than just metal. In Chapter 2, Saeris, a skilled thief, is confronted by her mentor, Elroy, after bringing a stolen gauntlet to his workshop. Elroy is furious, fearing the wrath of Queen Madra's guardians and the danger it will bring to them. Saeris defends her actions, explaining that the gauntlet is vital to her and her brother Hayden's survival. Despite Elroy's pleading for her to discard the gauntlet and avoid the deadly consequences, Saeris refuses, determined to use it for a better life. She leaves to confront Carrion Swift, a notorious gambler and former lover who has caused trouble for Hayden. Saeris demands the return of the money Carrion owes her brother, and after a tense exchange, Carrion hints at knowing about the gauntlet and the danger it poses. Saeris resolves to fix the situation, but when she returns to find Hayden and the gauntlet gone, she is left facing the consequences of her actions. In Chapter 3, Saeris runs through the streets of Zilvaren City, desperately searching for her brother Hayden, fearing he's gotten into trouble with the Queen's guardians over the stolen gauntlet. As she approaches the Mirage, she spots Hayden surrounded by a squad of armed guardians, holding the gauntlet. The guardians demand he hand it over, threatening to kill him. Saeris intervenes, lying to protect Hayden and confessing that she took the gauntlet, not him. However, Hayden tries to protect her by admitting his involvement, causing tension. Saeris fights back when the Guardians attempt to restrain her, using her skills to kill 2 Guardians and injure another. Despite the violence, she tells Hayden to leave and seek refuge with Elroy, as she knows the Guardians will kill her. As the chapter ends, Saeris faces capture, knowing she has no way out but to sacrifice herself for Hayden's safety. In Chapter 4, Saeris Fane is locked in a palace cell, waiting to meet Queen Madra after being captured for stealing a gauntlet. Saeris reflects on her childhood dreams of joining the palace, but now, those dreams have turned to thoughts of revenge for her mother's death. Captain Heron arrives to escort her to Madra, but Saeris is exhausted and thirsty. They make their way through the palace, and despite Saeris' defiant attitude, Heron informs her that Madra is interested in hearing her story. When they arrive at a vast hall, Saeris encounters Queen Madra, who is both beautiful and terrifying. Madra interrogates Saeris about the stolen gauntlet and her training with weapons, implying that she believes the Fae might be involved in a plot against her throne. Madra reveals her sadistic nature, threatening to destroy Saeris' family and the Third Ward if Saeris doesn't comply, making it clear that defiance will have deadly consequences. In Chapter 5, Saeris Fane faces the consequences of her actions, with Queen Madra ordering her torture after Saeris stole a gauntlet. Captain Heron drags Saeris to the palace, where Madra demands her screams. Despite being brutally injured by Heron, Saeris refuses to comply, reflecting on the suffering her people face in the Third Ward. She challenges Heron's privilege and perspective, but he remains unmoved. As Heron prepares to finish her off, Saeris unknowingly activates a strange power within herself, manipulating the dagger in Heron's hand, causing it to melt into liquid silver. Heron, terrified, tries to flee but is ensnared by the silver. As Saeris collapses, she is confronted by Death, who rises from the silver pool. Death expresses frustration at Saeris' condition, but he saves her from the agony, taking her into the pool, where she succumbs to unconsciousness, leaving her fate uncertain. In Chapter 6, Saeris Fane wakes up in a luxurious bed, confused and disoriented. She is in the Yvelian Winter Palace, not the Silver City, and is being cared for by Everlane, a Fae who has been visiting her while she recovered. Saeris learns that she has been unconscious for 10 days and is astonished to discover that Everlane is Fae, despite hearing myths about them. The two have a tense conversation about the Fae and their true nature. Saeris also learns that the Fae are not the monsters described in the stories. After Saeris reluctantly drinks some water, Everlane helps her dress in a royal blue gown, preparing her to meet Bellicon Debara, the king of the Yvelian Fae. As Saeris tries to grasp the magnitude of her situation, she feels the weight of the chain around her neck linked to a mysterious past event involving death. In Chapter 7, Saeris is guided through the opulent halls of the Winter Palace by Everlane, where the beauty of the Fae realm starkly contrasts with her previous experiences in Zilvaren. Saeris learns about the Fae gods, particularly Styx, Kurin, Nitsinai, and the twin goddesses Balmathan, as well as the ominous Zareth, god of chaos. The vastness and grandeur of the palace are overwhelming, and she remains cautious about her new surroundings. They eventually arrive in the Grand Hall, where King Bellicon Debara, the Fae King, presides over a tense trial for Kingfisher, a Fae warrior. Kingfisher, marked by chaos, is brought before the court in chains, and after a dramatic display, the king orders him to fight for the Fae. Saeris learns that she has awakened a powerful magic, and her role in Yvelia is tied to this event. Everlane reveals the Fae are always at war, and Saeris' safety remains uncertain. In Chapter 8, Saeris Fane begins to realize the stark differences between Yvelia and her homeland, Zilvaren. She is introduced to the Winter Palace, where snow falls daily, and is overwhelmed by the massive, breathtaking library. Saeris struggles with her place in this world, surrounded by cold disdain from the Fae court, yet she remains protected by the king. In the library, she meets Rosarius, a librarian, who seems fascinated by her presence, leading to discussions about her potential as an alchemist. Kingfisher, another court figure, hints at the possibility that Saeris could be the key to opening Quicksilver portals, which could bring war. Despite her grief over the presumed death of her brother and friends, Saeris demands answers. Kingfisher reveals that there may be a chance her people are still alive, though the situation is complicated by the political tensions in Yvelia. Saeris' ability to channel metal energy becomes a focal point as her journey unfolds. In Chapter 9, Saeris, Renfis, and Kingfisher head to a decaying forge, with Kingfisher leading the way. Saeris, intrigued by the Fae forge and the possibility of magic, reluctantly follows the group. Tension rises between the characters, especially between Kingfisher and Everlane, as their familial conflict becomes evident. Kingfisher reveals to Saeris the dark history of the Fae and their bloodlust toward humans, but Saeris, frustrated by his attitude, pushes back. She learns that Kingfisher's pendant is crucial to his sanity and allows him to travel between realms. Kingfisher admits that Saeris' ability to activate the Quicksilver was unexpected, and he kept her alive to use her as a bargaining chip in the ongoing war. Despite his cold demeanor, Saeris begins to understand that her role in the Fae world may be more significant than she thought. The chapter ends with Kingfisher revealing his magical abilities by restoring the forge to its original state, further demonstrating his power. In Chapter 10, Saeris and Everlane spend a quiet morning together, with Everlane showing subtle signs of emotional pain regarding her brother Kingfisher. They head to the library, where Kingfisher is his usual difficult self, and Saeris learns more about the alchemists, the magical beings who once transmuted metals and controlled the Quicksilver pathways. Saeris struggles to understand the ancient magic, but realizes the importance of learning how to control the Quicksilver to find her brother Hayden. During their session, Saeris discovers that she can read Common Fae, a language shared between realms, which explains her ability to understand the books. Everlane shares that Kingfisher is over 1,700 years old, and they discuss the fate of Fae who were trapped when Madra sealed the pathways. The chapter ends with Kingfisher forcibly teaching Saeris to control the Quicksilver, leading to a tense moment of magic manipulation before Saeris punches him in frustration. In Chapter 11, Saeris struggles with Everlane's insistence on dressing her in uncomfortable, elaborate gowns while avoiding discussing her altercation with Kingfisher. Everlane hints at Kingfisher's painful past with their father, King Bellicon, and shares how Kingfisher was blamed for his father's disappearance and blamed for his mother's death. Saeris reflects on the manipulative dynamics between Everlane and Kingfisher. Later, in the library, Saeris focuses on learning more about Quicksilver pathways, determined to use them to return home. Rosarius explains the alchemist's method of traveling through the pools, emphasizing that the process involves focusing on a destination. Saeris learns of the existence of a large Quicksilver pool in the Winter Palace, crucial for her plans. Despite the lengthy discussion, Saeris' thoughts remain fixed on Zilvaren, and she prepares to activate the pool to return to her world, though doubts linger. In Chapter 12, Saeris enters the forge, where Kingfisher is working in the heat. Their interactions are charged with tension, as Kingfisher teases Saeris about her reactions to him, calling her OSHA and pushing her buttons. He reveals plans to experiment with Quicksilver and Bone to create a relic. Saeris, determined to return home, reluctantly agrees to help with the process, despite her previous traumatic experience with the Quicksilver. As the two work together, Kingfisher becomes more provocative, testing Saeris' patience. A fox unexpectedly appears, biting Saeris, but Kingfisher shows no concern for its well-being. Saeris, in turn, grows increasingly frustrated with Kingfisher's behavior. Tension peaks when Saeris kisses him, her desire conflicting with her hatred for him. Kingfisher taunts her afterwards, suggesting a future encounter, before dematerializing, leaving Saeris shaken and determined to keep her distance from him. In Chapter 13, Saeris runs through the Yvelian palace, carrying a fox in her bag, determined to reach the Quicksilver pool. She evades guards and moves deeper into the palace, guided by the whispers of the Quicksilver. After navigating tunnels, she reaches the vast cavern housing the pool, only to be interrupted by Kingfisher, who appears in a cloud of black smoke. He demands a blood oath from Saeris in exchange for retrieving her brother Hayden from Zilvaren. Reluctantly, Saeris agrees. Kingfisher goes through the pool and Saeris waits anxiously. When he returns, dragging a lifeless body, she quickly helps him with his pendant. However, the person he brings back is not Hayden, but someone else entirely, Carrion Swift. Saeris is devastated, realizing that Kingfisher's promise has been broken. In Chapter 14, Saeris confronts Kingfisher about the body he brought back, which he claims is her brother Hayden. However, the body is identified as Carrion Swift, not Hayden. Kingfisher defends his actions, explaining the difficulty of retrieving Carrion under the hostile conditions in Zilvaren. Saeris, frustrated and tired, is forced to follow Kingfisher through the palace's hidden passages, enduring the physical strain. Kingfisher orders her onto a horse, and they leave the palace in the middle of the night. As they travel, Saeris experiences the cold and beauty of Yvelia's snowy landscape for the first time. Kingfisher insists that she's bound by the blood oath they made, demanding her help in forging relics. Saeris insists on keeping Onyx, the fox, with her. After a tense journey, they reach a new location, and Kingfisher suggests that they'll be forced to work together despite their constant antagonism. In Chapter 15, Saeris and Kingfisher make their way through the snowy forest, avoiding the town below the Winter Palace. As they travel, they encounter disturbing wails from non-corporeal creatures, which Kingfisher explains are shades, echoes of creatures who died in distress. Saeris, uncomfortable with the dark and eerie environment, grows increasingly frustrated with Kingfisher's dismissive attitude. After hours of travel, they reach a rundown tavern where Kingfisher's identity is unexpectedly revealed. The tavern patrons recognize him as the legendary Fisher King, a hero known for saving countless lives in past battles. While Saeris is bewildered by this revelation, the locals offer their gratitude, raising their glasses in honor of Kingfisher. Despite the admiration he receives, Kingfisher seems uncomfortable with the attention, ultimately storming out of the tavern. Saeris is left in shock, realizing that Kingfisher's past is far more complicated than she ever imagined. In Chapter 16, Saeris and Kingfisher prepare to enter a shadow gate, a dangerous portal that will transport them closer to their destination. Saeris is reluctant, but Kingfisher forces her through by using the binding oath she made with him. The gate's power overwhelms her, causing intense physical pain, nausea, and disorientation. Once they arrive on the other side, Saeris is physically ill and confused, but Renfis reassures her. She learns that Kingfisher's harsh behavior is partly due to the effects of the Quicksilver, which torments him. Saeris finds out Hayden is alive and well, working in the 7th, and is relieved. However, she remains trapped in Kingfisher's manipulative grasp. Carrion adds humor, but Saeris remains frustrated with Kingfisher's control. After a tense exchange, Kingfisher reluctantly promises Saeris they will return to Zilvaren once she helps him make enough relics, giving her a glimmer of autonomy, but under his terms. In Chapter 17, Saeris arrives at Kalish, a surprisingly peaceful and beautiful place compared to her expectations of a war camp. She learns about its history from Kingfisher, who reveals that it was once his home before being forced to move. They meet a fire sprite named Archer, who reacts with overwhelming joy upon seeing Kingfisher return. Saeris is disturbed by their emotional exchange, but Kingfisher brushes off her questions. As they move through the estate, Kingfisher explains the magic of the Shadow Gates and why they had to travel the way they did. In the forge, Saeris is confronted with a massive trunk of precious rings. Kingfisher demands she melt down each of them to create relics for his warriors, revealing the full scope of her task, to make 15,000 relics. She realizes the gravity of her situation and the enormity of the task she's agreed to. In Chapter 18, Saeris struggles with the task of creating relics from silver rings, feeling frustrated by her failures and the lack of Quicksilver to aid her experiments. After several unsuccessful attempts, she stumbles upon a small amount of Quicksilver, but her trials still yield no results. Ren visits, exhausted from battle, and encourages her to connect with Fisher, who has been pushing her hard. Ren reveals that he pushed Fisher to spend time with her to avoid her becoming a broken tool. Later, Saeris reluctantly agrees to dinner with Fisher. The dinner turns awkward with an exaggeratedly long table between them, and the conversation quickly shifts to the supply of silver, which is tightly controlled by Belicon. As Saeris tries to get answers from Fisher, the dining room is attacked by grotesque creatures, forcing Fisher into action. He swiftly kills the attackers, saving Saeris, who is injured in the process. Fisher warns that their need for silver is tied to these creatures, known as feeders. In Chapter 19, Saeris wakes up from a nightmarish dream of being pursued by monstrous feeders in a maze of endless doors. She finds herself in a lavish room, injured but healed by fey magic. Fisher, sitting in the shadows, hints at his dark, complex feelings about her, but dismisses the attack on the house as insignificant. Tension between them rises as she questions his motives, and he reveals the depth of his disdain for humans. Their interaction escalates when Fisher, using the blood oath to compel Saeris, forces her to remain in bed for several days. During this time, she battles boredom, while Carrion visits with a mischievous attitude. Ren arrives dirty from battle and delivers an invitation from Fisher for dinner, which Saeris reluctantly agrees to attend. At the dinner, the dynamics between Saeris, Fisher, Ren, and Carrion unfold, exposing deeper tensions and attraction, especially when Fisher taunts Saeris about their growing connection. In Chapter 20, Saeris arrives at the war camp, a bleak and sprawling settlement near the Sanis-Rothian border. As she surveys the camp, she notices the ominous Amentraeth fortress across the river, marking the enemy's stronghold. Fisher leads them through the camp, and tensions rise as they encounter the Fey warriors. Ren, the general, trains with Carrion, teaching him swordplay while Saeris reflects on her own skills. After a brief but intense training session with Ren, Saeris finds herself drawn into the complicated dynamics of the camp. Fisher's return from his absence stirs anger among the Fae, especially from Danya, who accuses him of abandoning them. Despite Fisher's attempts to explain, the confrontation escalates, and Saeris' unexpected intervention with magic surprises everyone. Just as tensions reach a boiling point, an urgent cry signals an impending attack by the enemy, prompting the Fey warriors to scramble into action. In Chapter 21, the war camp faces a dire threat as the Sanis-Rothian horde, 50,000 strong, approaches. The Fey warriors race to break the ice on the Darn River to prevent the bloodthirsty vampires from crossing. Saeris and Carrion join the effort, wielding massive hammers to break the thick ice. Despite their efforts, the vampires begin to cross, but Fisher's magic intervenes, pulling the vampires into the river's depths with black smoke. As the threat subsides, Malcolm, the vampire king, taunts Fisher, revealing that he and Fisher share a past. His mocking words create tension among the Fae, casting doubt on Fisher's loyalties. Fisher's mysterious connection with Malcolm raises questions, and the Fae warriors are left to grapple with the implications. The chapter ends with Malcolm's threat looming over the camp as he vows to confront Fisher again soon. In Chapter 22, Fisher finds Saeris outside the war room, and after a brief exchange with Ren, he takes her to his bedroom. There, they have a tense conversation about the recent events at the riverbank and Fisher's reluctance to share details about his past with Malcolm, the vampire king. Fisher reveals that the Fae were cursed, and some, like Malcolm, embraced the curse, becoming vampires. Saeris presses Fisher, realizing he's bound by something that prevents him from telling her the full truth. The tension between them escalates as they confront their complicated feelings for each other. Fisher's assertive actions push Saeris to confront her desires, and they have a passionate encounter. Afterward, Fisher insists she stay in his room, leaving her conflicted. Archer, a fire sprite, arrives with refreshments, and Saeris awkwardly tries to cover up what happened, though Archer isn't fooled. In Chapter 23, Saeris confronts Fisher about the unexpected tattoo on her chest, which she didn't ask for. Fisher dismisses her concerns, claiming it'll fade, but Saeris is frustrated. The conversation turns serious when Fisher insists she visit the camp healer due to the possibility of a child between a fae and human. Saeris reveals that she's been sterilized since she was 14, a practice in her ward to prevent women from having children. Fisher reacts with shock and confusion. He dismisses her explanation and orders her to the forge to continue working. Saeris struggles to locate it, but eventually finds herself working with Carrion. After a failed trial with the Quicksilver, Fisher appears, injured from training, and dismisses Carrion as useless. Saeris defends him and Fisher's temper flares. He unexpectedly calls Saeris Moonlight, which leaves her both confused and flustered, before he orders her to stop her work for the day. In Chapter 24, Renfis and Saeris discuss the damaged sword with shards embedded in the stone. Ren explains its cultural significance to the Fae, revealing the sword is an heirloom imbued with magic. Saeris is frustrated over her unintentional destruction of it, but Fisher, who is in a bad mood from training, insists it's not a big deal. He later reveals that the sword contained Quicksilver, the same material Saeris can control, explaining its reaction to her. The group discusses Saeris' anomaly, as she may be the most powerful alchemist ever, able to work with Quicksilver in ways never seen before. Ren and Lorith reveal the dire state of the war, with only a year left before Malcolm's forces overwhelmed them. In a tavern, Lorith shares his personal history, including how Fisher saved his life by bonding a part of his soul to him. Lorith vows to die for Fisher, ensuring his soul is returned if Fisher dies first. In Chapter 25, Saeris wakes up to find Fisher distant and uncommunicative, leading her to feel disconnected and displaced in Kalish. After a day of wandering the estate, she becomes frustrated with Fisher's absence. When he finally returns, they have an awkward interaction, with Saeris questioning his behavior. Fisher then takes her to a village called Ballard, where they join a feast celebrating the longest night of the year. The village is filled with diverse fae creatures, and Saeris is struck by its peacefulness, contrasting with the war and destruction she knows. While there, Saeris learns more about Fisher's past, including his bond with Lorith after saving his life. The chapter reveals Fisher's deep sorrow for abandoning his people and failing as the Lord of Kalish. Later, they visit a house that belonged to Fisher's mother, a place that holds painful memories for him. The chapter ends with Fisher offering Saeris a place to sleep in his childhood home. In Chapter 26, Saeris wakes to hear Fisher screaming in pain. She rushes to his room where she finds him in agony, seemingly unable to move, enduring what appears to be a seizure or extreme distress. Despite his insistence that he'll be fine and that she should leave, Saeris stays by his side, refusing to leave him in his suffering. Fisher eventually admits that the pain is caused by the Quicksilver in his body, and Saeris helps him with water, staying with him for several hours as he continues to tremble and chant. As the night wears on, Saeris opens up about her traumatic past, revealing the hardships she endured after her mother's violent death at the hands of Madra's guardians. Fisher, still struggling with his pain, shares a brief, intimate moment with her. By the end of the chapter, they find comfort in each other's presence, despite the unresolved tension between them. In Chapter 27, Saeris wakes up to find herself in Fisher's arms, feeling vulnerable and unsure of what will happen next. As they lay together, Fisher's hand moves slowly across her body, and Saeris grapples with her emotions. Despite her internal conflict, she responds to his touch, and they share a heated, intimate moment. Afterward, Saeris reflects on her past and reveals painful memories of her mother's death and the harsh life she endured. Fisher listens but remains largely quiet, though they grow closer. Fisher uses magic to conjure clothes for Saeris, and they share a moment of awkwardness and tension when Saeris notices runes appearing on her skin, marking her in a way she doesn't fully understand. These runes are linked to alchemist magic, but Fisher remains evasive about their true meaning. The chapter ends with a shift in the mood between them, and Saeris realizes that Fisher's earlier apology referred not to the bird tattoo, but to the bite mark on her neck. In Chapter 28, Saeris is struggling with her Quicksilver trials and frustration mounts as she fails to combine the Quicksilver with other metals. When Carrion interrupts her, offering a suggestion to simply ask the Quicksilver to meld with the silver, Saeris reluctantly tries it. To her surprise, the Quicksilver responds, offering a conversation where it reveals it wants a song in exchange for being forged into a blade. The voices in the Quicksilver express skepticism about the worthiness of warriors, but Saeris manages to convince it by promising to uphold her part of the deal. As she begins to collect the shards of Danya's sword, Lorith unexpectedly arrives and uses his magic to speed up the process. Saeris is thrilled by the progress and feels confident that she can now forge a sword. She grins at Lorith, eager to seek his help with the rings. In Chapter 29, Saeris is hard at work forging a sword using Danya's sword pieces and Quicksilver, finally succeeding in melding them together. She seeks help from Lorith, who carves a detailed wolf's head for the pommel. After hours of intense labor, Saeris completes the sword, which is praised by Fisher and Lorith. As they stand in awe of the final product, the Quicksilver demands a song in exchange for its cooperation. Lorith sings a ballad of the Ajengate, recounting Fisher's heroic actions, which the Quicksilver accepts. However, the song is mysteriously erased from memory, leaving Saeris as the only one to remember it. Lorith is then asked to name the sword, which he does, calling it Avisieth, the unsung song. The moment he names it, the sword erupts with magical energy, creating a blinding light and shaking the ground. Fisher reacts with joy, witnessing the sword's power. In Chapter 30, Saeris is exhausted after a long day of forging, but Fisher insists she rest in his tent. After a bath, Fisher's intimate care for Saeris becomes a quiet moment of connection, reinforcing their growing bond. Later, Fisher is called away to address a crisis in the camp, and Wren informs them that the Horde is causing chaos near the river. Saeris, determined not to be left behind, insists on going with Fisher. They strike a pact, with Saeris swearing to follow Fisher's orders and stay close. Fisher gives her his father's sword, Solace, acknowledging its significance and placing it at her waist. Wren, witnessing this exchange, expresses his approval. As they prepare for the impending battle, Fisher and Saeris share a final moment of quiet resolve before heading into the fray, with Wren humorously adding a final toast to the future. In Chapter 31, Saeris, Fisher, and Wren prepare for a confrontation with the vampires at the Darn River. Fisher and Wren are poised for battle as a group of vampires attempts to cross the ice, which is weakened by the strong current. Saeris observes the vampires' horrific appearances and helps fight them off as they breach the ice. Fisher and Wren unleash their magic to stop them, with Wren using explosive orbs of light and Fisher wielding his sword, Nimmerel, with deadly precision. Saeris, wielding the sword Solace, impresses Wren with her skills, though she struggles with the emotional weight of the battle. The vampires continue to emerge from the water, but Lorith's magic, amplified by his sword Avisieth, turns the tide. As the battle reaches its peak, a triumphant chant fills the air, only to be interrupted by the arrival of Everlane, who appears with a horde of vampires, setting the stage for a new conflict. In Chapter 32, Fisher, Wren, and Saeris face Everlane's capture by Taladeus, a vampire sent by Malcolm. Everlane, enthralled by Malcolm, is trapped across the river with a group of vampires. Despite Fisher's initial urge to rush across and save her, Wren and Fisher realize that attempting to cross the river would be futile, as they would lose their magic and be vulnerable. Taladeus taunts Fisher, revealing that Malcolm has bitten Everlane, making her his, and Fisher must either come for her or seek vengeance. Taladeus mocks Fisher, stating that Malcolm's true target is Fisher himself. Fisher, in a moment of quiet grief, confirms the threat Malcolm poses. Lorith joins the group, furious at the situation. Taladeus threatens that if Fisher doesn't comply, Everlane will be used as a pawn by Malcolm. Fisher refuses to back down, declaring that Malcolm can't have her, but Taladeus ominously suggests that Malcolm always gets what he wants. In Chapter 33, Fisher, Wren, Lorith, and Saeris grapple with Everlane's capture and the consequences of Malcolm's blood curse. Lorith is furious that they couldn't save her, and Fisher is overwhelmed with guilt and grief. Wren explains that Malcolm's venom, after one bite, enslaves the victim, turning them into a thrall, mindlessly devoted to their vampire master. Fisher reveals that Everlane is already lost, unable to break the thrall's bond, and she will either die or become a feeder. Danya storms in, demanding her old sword back, but receives a harsh punishment for touching Lorith's newly reforged sword. Fisher, however, forgives her and agrees to return to Kalish to consult Telena and search for a way to save Everlane. Fisher then acknowledges Saeris as a warrior, and the group honors her bravery in battle with a ritual of blood. Fisher's quiet respect and the group's solidarity deepen their bond amidst their shared crisis. In Chapter 34, Saeris navigates the tension in the camp after Everlane's capture. Danya criticizes her for sitting at the family table, but Wren and Fisher defend her. Fisher reveals Everlane has become a thrall to Malcolm, and there's little hope of saving her. Danya's temper causes her to lash out at Lorith, and she pays the price by losing her hand to Aviciath's magic. Despite her punishment, Fisher shows compassion, agreeing to take her to Kalish for healing. Saeris, grappling with her emotions, has a quiet moment with Carrion in the forge, where the Quicksilver reveals a secret. Saeris no longer wants to return to Zilvaren, preferring to stay in Yvelia. As she bonds with the Quicksilver, she learns that Fisher's fate might be tied to the relics, and the knowledge leaves her shaken. Talina, the healer, discusses the Fey tradition of runes, hinting at a deeper connection between Saeris and Fisher. In Chapter 35, Saeris confronts Fisher about why he refused to say her name. He confesses that he feared her presence as a vulnerability, knowing that she would be the key to Malcolm's manipulation. Fisher shares a painful revelation about the Oshellith, creatures sacred to the Fae, and his mother's prophecy about Saeris being the one to change his life. Fisher admits he rejected their bond because of his fear for her safety, but he's now uncertain of the future. Saeris, heartbroken, confronts him about his plan to die, but Fisher insists he will never let anyone burden him with caring for him. Saeris realizes that if he dies, Lorith will too, since part of Fisher's soul is tied to him. Fisher denies it, but Saeris is determined to fight for both of them, vowing to research ways to save Everlane and Fisher, refusing to accept defeat. In Chapter 36, Saeris confronts Fisher about why he never said her name, learning that he feared her presence as his vulnerability. Fisher admits that he knew she would change everything, and his mother's prophecy about her coming into his life shakes him deeply. As they continue their mission, the group struggles to find a witch capable of helping Everlane, whose condition is deteriorating due to Malcolm's venom. Fisher and Wren visit Fulton's Gap to seek a powerful witch, but tensions rise when Danya's behavior causes trouble. Eventually, Fisher returns with Isabel, a witch from the Balquitter clan, who agrees to help but questions the group's readiness to face Malcolm and his lords. Fisher tries to warn Saeris and Carrion about the danger, but both are determined to help rescue Everlane. Fisher reluctantly agrees, signaling they're prepared to face whatever comes next. In Chapter 37, Saeris and Fisher share a quiet, intimate moment before the coming battle. Fisher invites her to sleep with him, and they talk about their connection and the bond between them. Fisher confesses that he accepted their mating bond despite knowing the complications due to their different lifespans. He assures her that she still has time to decide whether to accept the bond, and if she doesn't, his wings and the marks will disappear. As they spend the night together, Saeris struggles with her emotions, overwhelmed by Fisher's confession and the reality of their situation. The chapter ends with them preparing for Everlane's rescue, and Saeris recalling that Fisher had once mentioned needing something from Ballard, but never obtaining it, something related to hope. In Chapter 38, Saeris wakes to find Fisher gone, leaving behind a letter explaining his departure. He has gone alone to Gelethri to save Everlane, unarmed and without the sword Nimmerel. Fisher's letter reveals his sacrifice, stating that he has accepted their mating bond and that Saeris is free to choose her path, including rejecting the bond if she wishes. Saeris is devastated by his decision and rushes to confront her friends. The group learns there is no Quicksilver pool at Gelethri, dimming their hope. In a tense moment, Isabel, a witch, joins the team, and a brief clash with Lorith is diffused. Suddenly, Everlane crashes through a shadow gate, signaling urgency. Saeris rushes to help her, and with the team's quick action, they step through the gate to face the unknown. In Chapter 39, Saeris, Lorith, and Carrion find themselves in a perilous situation after being thrown into a lake by a shadow gate. Saeris nearly drowns but is rescued by Lorith, while Carrion struggles to recover from swallowing water. They find themselves on a beach surrounded by towering obsidian cliffs with no clear way out. They must climb to escape the cove. As they ascend, they encounter a horrifying sight, a massive amphitheater full of chanting people. Fisher is visible in the distance, standing at the top of a set of stone steps. As tension rises, the group is confronted by Harren, the captain of Madra's guard, who threatens Lorith and Saeris with a dagger. He then opens a distorted vortex, urging them to enter. With no other choice, Saeris steps into the vortex despite its unnatural feel and hears Fisher's desperate warning. In Chapter 40, Saeris, Lorith, and Carrion arrive at an amphitheater, where they find Fisher on his knees, covered in blood and tortured by Malcolm. The scene reveals the unholy alliance between Malcolm, Belicon, and Madra. Belicon and Madra, once enemies, are now aligned with Malcolm, with Bellicon admitting that past wrongs have been forgiven. Malcolm mocks Fisher and the group, taunting them with the knowledge that Fisher cannot speak about past events due to an oath. The truth about Fisher's past involvement with the Regents is hinted at but not revealed. As the crowd roars, Bellicon releases Fisher from his oath, compelling him to reveal his secrets. Meanwhile, Saeris realizes the extent of the nightmare surrounding them, an amphitheater full of tortured, burned souls, still animated and trapped in their suffering. The situation escalates as Fisher is forced to confront the horrors of his past. In Chapter 41, Fisher, weakened and bloodied, shares the story of his past actions with the Regents Malcolm, Bellicon, and Madra. He recounts how he tried to save Gelethri from the vampire horde, but was forced into a deadly deal with Bellicon involving a coin toss. The coin never touched the ground, and Fisher was forced to burn the city to prevent the horde from taking it. As the Regents mock him, Fisher reveals he entered a Quicksilver pool, where he was finally able to retrieve his father's sword. Using the sword's solace, Fisher attacks Bellicon, swiftly stabbing him through the stomach and throat in a moment of vengeance. His actions provoke Madra's fury, and chaos erupts. The chapter ends with a bloodbath as Fisher exacts his revenge, and the Regent's twisted game reaches a dangerous new level. In Chapter 42, chaos ensues as Fisher, Lorith, and Carrion battle the Triumvirate, Malcolm, Bellicon, and Madra inside the labyrinth. Fisher reveals the brutal truth about his past, explaining that he had to burn Gelethri to prevent Malcolm's vampire horde from taking the city. Meanwhile, Carrion challenges Bellicon, exposing his ties to Malcolm and his cruelty toward Everlane. As Fisher collapses from exhaustion, the group fights to reach the center of the labyrinth, where Fisher leads them toward the Quicksilver. They face obstacles, including a terrifying demon named Morthil, which they narrowly escape. The group reaches a silver coin pile, with the Quicksilver hidden inside Morthil's corpse. Saeris, guided by an unknown force, retrieves the coin from the demon's mouth, but before she can escape, Malcolm catches her. The chapter ends with a tense confrontation as he demands the coin. In Chapter 43, Malcolm attempts to force Saeris to help him regain his power, but she refuses. He reveals his knowledge of her alchemist heritage and mocks her relationship with Fisher. In a violent confrontation, Malcolm injures Saeris severely, but she retaliates by stabbing him in the throat with a dagger. Malcolm's body begins to heal, and he demands the coin Saeris retrieved, only to discover it's missing. Saeris, using the coin, initiates a powerful wind that sweeps away the tortured souls trapped in the amphitheater, weakening Malcolm. As Malcolm tries to regroup, Saeris collapses from her injuries. Fisher arrives and desperately tries to save her, but Taladeus warns him that Saeris will die unless he lets him help. Taladeus offers to turn Saeris into a vampire to save her, but Fisher hesitates, fearing the consequences. Saeris consents, and the transformation begins as she loses consciousness. In Chapter 44, Saeris, gravely injured, is near death as the world around her collapses in chaos. Fisher, desperately trying to save her, is interrupted by a voice, guiding Saeris through her impending fate. As she nears death, the voice offers her a choice: walk through a door to the next life or stay. Saeris chooses to remain with Fisher. However, the Quicksilver calls in her debt, requesting an audience with her. She is transported to a mystical realm where Zareth, the god of chaos, awaits. He reveals that Saeris and Fisher are tied together by fate, and their union could lead to the destruction of the universe. Zareth offers Saeris a chance to sever her connection to fate and live freely, but it comes with a cost. After much deliberation, Saeris agrees to Zareth's offer, accepting the transformation that will protect her and Fisher's future. Zareth pushes her into the Quicksilver to begin the transformation. In Chapter 45, Saeris, recovering from her transformation into a half-vampire, half-fae hybrid, struggles with the aftermath of her near-death experience. Taladeus reveals her new nature, but she is disturbed by her appearance and the changes she's undergone. After a tense conversation, Saeris learns that her memories were blocked during her transition, and she recalls the traumatic moments when Taladeus bit her. Despite the confusion, Fisher reassures her, expressing his deep commitment to her regardless of her transformation. However, Saeris soon learns that her new identity has thrust her into a political crisis. She is now the heir to the vampire throne and is set to be coronated in 2 days as the Queen of Sanisroth, a role she feels unprepared for. Fisher, though concerned, is determined to face the challenges ahead with her, signaling a new chapter in their tumultuous journey.